This works out, then it won't have this being around.
Okay, so we're in the middle of Siman Kuf Pei Zayin Hilchos Niddah. And we started discussing last week the sugya of Ro'ah Dam Machmat Tashmish. It is possible, even though it's very rare, for a woman to see blood as a result of the relationship that she has with her husband. We do know, and we will be learning more about it later, that there is something called Dam Besulin, that as a result of the breaking of that particular membrane that the Besula has, blood is expected to be seen. Even though that's not Dam Niddah per se, she's still Tmeya. She still has, of course, the halachas of a Niddah. And there are times that a woman sees blood other than her period, Yore Deah, which also renders her Tmeya. There are times that a woman sees Dam. We talked a little bit about the concept of what that can occur. Because of her desire, or anxious, excited, you will see blood. Blood that can come about as a result of all kinds of strenuous activities. Even something as simple as flying overseas. Believe it or not, it happens quite often that women all of a sudden will have their period even though they just had it a little while ago. There's apparently all kinds of activities that creates all kinds of pressures on the human body, and depending on the woman too, she may see blood. So we've come to see that this happens. What we have not seen, we've not gotten into depth, is that the amount of blood that comes out. It could be as little as a keten, as a stain, which we'll talk about eventually. All the halachas that relate to something to staining. And it could be shofa adam, that she has a tremendous amount of blood. And that could also vary from woman to woman. That can vary with the age. It varies with the day. It's the beginning of the period versus the end of the period, and so forth. What we have not really seen so much is injuries. There could be a dam from an injury, a dam hamaka, it's called. And that's where things can become a little complicated. Because if it's really only a maka, if it's really only an injury, a sore, blister, or whatever, then she shouldn't have to be taken away from her husband. Her husband shouldn't have to be taken away from her. In other words, for a number of days, just because of the dam hamaka. The problem is we don't always know where this dam is coming from.
It was a dam hamaka at all.
Exactly. It shouldn't. If we knew for sure it's dam hamaka. Right, exactly, yeah. But that's where things become a little bit more complicated, because it may require further investigation, medical investigation, professional investigation if possible. And if it cannot be ascertained, then there's a suffix. And we already know by now a little bit about Hilchos Sfeikos. It's the suffix deraisa, if it's a sfeika, how many sfeikas do you really have? What's the status of this woman? Does she have a chazaka to begin with? And many times she has a chesket tahara. We've seen that too. Chazaka helps. If a woman has a chazaka, then we could be a little bit more lenient. And there are various scenarios where we may be machmir in a particular scenario and be mekel in another scenario, which we'll review a little bit. So there's all kinds of situations. Now, in Kuf Pei Zayin, we began to explain what appears to be possibly an illness, according to one opinion. According to other opinions, it's not an illness, it's another kind of veset. It's a symptom of the body, that a woman that has tashmish with her husband, that's when somehow it triggers blood to come out. So some call it a choili. It's definitely a type of weakness in the body, as the Gemara describes it. Somehow there's pressure there as a result of the relationship. It could cause some of the veins or some of the blood vessels to burst. And of course, if that happens, we suspect that it's dam min hamakor. Dam min hamakor means dam from the source, dam from the womb. And if it's coming from that particular area, there's a good chance that it's dam tomen. Even though there's a machlekes legabe dam that comes from there that is not dam nid. Nonetheless, it comes from there. What's the status of that? Okay, that's something else. Maybe we'll discuss that another time. Because it's coming from the same spot. But it's not dam niddah. But right now we don't know anything more than the fact that royam machmas tashmish is an issue, because we apparently have seen it 3 times happening, and something that happens 3 times they have a zacha. If this is what's causing the dam to come out, she and he are in trouble. In other words, they cannot continue, because if this is in fact dam tameh, which apparently it is, so apparent. I say apparently because there's always a possibility that it's not. small possibility. But apparently, as a result of that relationship, that physical contact, that's what's happening. That's what's triggering it. So we suspect the worst. And therefore, there's only very few options. Either they get divorced, right? Or we can be convinced that she has completely healed somehow. In other words, according to the opinions that allow her, with her first husband, to have completely recovered. That, there was some allowance for that if we know for sure is recovered. And as we said also last time, today it is possible. Today there is treatment, there is medication. So it is possible even for the first husband, for the first relationship, to be spared. If there's to be spared, in other words, to be preserved. To remain together, even though it's been 3 times. And you think, and we learned 3 times, 3 strikes and you're out.
Well,
Yeah. So that was the basic halacha, right? That was the basic halacha, that she goes on to a second husband.
But it can be.
But exactly. But if it can be determined with certainty that she has completely recovered, then what's the problem? But we're choishish, at least in the original halacha, we were choishish that obviously this is a problem. But it may not be with a second husband, so it's to her benefit to try someone else. Because kilo kola it's boys shavos. Right? Not all the fingers are the same. And then we said, lo kol hakoichos shavim, not all the relationships are the same, because some may be with more effort, some with less effort. So we're giving her several chances with several husbands. And even after all of that is said and done, there's always the bdikas hashfoferet.
Still without a bdikas hashfoferet?
Right. We're talking about a bdika that's even better than a bdikas hashfoferet. Right.
So
it's the ultimate bdika.
It's not
Right. It's better. It's even better. Right. You remember, because the bdikas shferferes that we talked about, the tube, it was from her doing, but it was at the very, very end.
Right.
After the third. It was like a last resort. According to one opinion, it was a last resort.
Right.
Or according to the other opinion, it wasn't a last resort. It was just to see if he had recovered. Her way of telling, her primitive way of telling, whether it's no longer a problem. It's a primitive way.
Bdikas hashfoferet was, I thought, to determine injury, or whether it's really before.
Right. It can determine.
Wasn't that the purpose of bdikas hashfoferet?
Right, but we leave it to the very, very end.
Yes.
Right. As a last resort, we can rely on that. Right.
But that was the purpose, though.
Right. That was the purpose. So we did bring up that there are poskim that hold that today, especially, that we do have this technology in the area of medicine to be able to determine with some degree of certainty that she has completely recovered from whatever it was she was having. Then it should not prevent them from staying together, because after all, the chachamim we see from the halachas we learned so far have done everything that's within reach to not me'agen a woman, not, in other words, cause her to become aguna, to not be. So if we can help her, in any case, of course we try to help her.
So now what you're saying, when you're saying that research into investigate,
Right.
So are we trying to determine or not in this with modern medicine?
Sure.
Or are we
That
trying
too.
to determine
Yeah.
if it's coming from the core, whether it's
No, in other words, we're trying to determine, first of all, where is it coming from.
Okay.
That's
Let's
number
say
one.
we
Now we want to determine if it's hamaka.
Now, let's say we determine it's coming from
Right.
because of a mark, because of the etzba is causing dump to come out.
Right.
So now that we've established that one now fit factor.
If we know that somehow that's not going to cause her, she's no longer allergic, she's no longer weak in that spot, she had a bruise from before, she had something from birth,
So it was only
it was removed, whatever it was, yeah.
temporary thing.
Yeah, that's what they determined. That whatever it was temporary. She's taking more iron pills, and as a result of that, she's stronger, and as a result of that, she won't have that reaction. Whatever it is.
There's a possibility she might not have, or
Well, that was the question. Do we
That's
take
the
a
thing.
chance? Do we take a chance? Because it is a chance. So obviously, the doctors would have had to determine that based on their current knowledge and what they see is that she's going to recover. And we will go into this a little bit more when we talk about doctor exams. And one of those doctor exams that may need to be done from time to time is exactly this. Where is the blood coming from? Who do we trust? Do we trust a woman? If she knows, she says she knows where it's coming from. Can we trust her? When we trust a doctor, can we trust a non-Jewish doctor? And we'll discuss this bli neder next week when we talk about ne'emonos. So we reintroduce back again to the whole concept of ne'emonos, which we spoke about in Basar of Taaruvot. We spoke a little bit about it in the beginning of Hilchos Niddah, about the Isha, the ne'emonos of the Isha telling her husband certain things, right? But now we're going to get into a very, very more sensitive area of ne'emonos, because we're dealing with doctors, with very, very detailed information that can make or break, that can determine here whether she's may or not, in a very complex way. It's complex because, back then at least they didn't have all the tools to always ascertain where this was coming from. And so all you were left with was one suffix. Is this from the Makor or not? But now we may have two sveikas. It could be a Makkah too. So if you have a sveika, it makes things a lot easier. But if there's no Makkah, and all you're left is with one suffix, it's a big problem. And therefore, if you can tell it's from the Makor, and you don't know it's a Makkah, then again, you're still left with one suffix. So it makes it a lot more difficult. What if you know it's a Makkah, but you don't know if it's bleeding from the Makkah? She has a Makkah. She has a bruise. But who says she's bleeding from the bruise? So that's what's going to make this sif that we're covering somewhat briefly today is going to be discussing.
Which sif?
Hey, but we'll be doing sif Daled and Hey. Last time we did Aleph Beis Gimel, now we're going to be doing Daled and Hey. And Hey, it's where it begins to be a little bit difficult, only because the Mechaber is not very clear who he holds. He doesn't get into all the details, and there are various shittas in the Rishonim here, and the Ramah elaborates a little bit more. So there's quite a few shittas here, but we'll go through it briefly as to how we hold the Maisa. So first, let's talk about Sif Daled. Daled is a little bit easier. Daled says like this. All right, up until now we learned that it appears that anytime she was with her husband, that was triggering the blood. Okay. She cleaned herself right away, or I should say she checked herself right away, and sure enough, it's right away, so you can't really be mistaken about it. We see, this is what triggered it. Okay. But Mechaber says in Sif Dalet, that what happens if Im Shimsha Samuch Levesta. So she has a veset of sorts, and there was an incident where she was with her husband, and it was close to her veset, and all of a sudden she sees blood. Well, since it's Samuch Levesto, she has a veset, we're lucky. Because Anotoilim Reiyoso Mishum Vesto, Velo Chashvinu Lo Roye Matmas Tashmish. If she does have a veset, and she somehow, and we're going to have to figure out how did she do it, she's not allowed to. We learned that already. Samuch Levesto, remember? Keep distance. All right, we'll get to that. That's one of the questions here. But Mechaber doesn't talk about that. Mechaber just says the plain halacha. Shimshot Samuch Levesta. So, don't jump to conclusions that it's Roya Machmas Tashmish. Because, toiling, you could be lenient. You could say, and attribute the dam that she saw, Mishum Vesto. Velo Chashvina Lo Roya Machmas. And then we don't consider this as an example of Roya Machmas Tashmish. Baruch Hashem. Okay. At least it's not that. It could be her vessel. She's expecting it any day, any hour. Don't count it.
It'll start again.
Yeah. If
we don't count this, we'll start counting.
Exactly. You don't count this one. You say mikre, as we say in Hebrew. It was just coincidental.
You don't count it. You say you saw 3 times because of touch.
That's right. Right. It doesn't count. It's not considered Roy Machmas.
It's not one of the 3 of touch.
It's not. No, it's not Roy Machmas. That's exactly.
So it would be considered.
It could be. Yeah.
The tashmish
right.
Triggered this reaction.
Right.
So would that make her now aser have a tashmish during around the time of the vest? Let's say it happened the night before the vest.
Okay.
So would that next month make it to have tashmish?
No, not necessarily. Yeah, we will see. We'll see.
It has to be 3 pro or something?
Yeah. It's so far. We know that nothing is an exact science when it comes to this. Even though there is some regularity, it is a clock, but it's not a Swiss clock.
How close are we talking?
Oh, yeah? Okay. Yeah.
How close are we talking? Yes.
So, Ilan's example is a good example, because that's what the Meforshim bring down. Let's say her veset is during the day, and she saw at night. The night before. Let's call Samuch Levesta. She's expecting during the day, and she saw at night. All right, but before we get into the halacha itself of how did this come about, and why was she intimate with her husband Samuch Levesta, there is a machlokes rishonim here, and if that's the way to interpret the Gemara, what the Gemara or the sugya is talking about, because that sugya is talking about various scenarios. It's talking about Ro'os Dam Machmas Tashmish, and then of course it introduces the Samuch Levesta. It is a scenario of Makkah. It talks about various scenarios, and therefore the Rishonim interpret this din over here of Shimsho Samuch Levesta differently, and that's what's interesting here. It's not clear what the Gemara meant by that. So let's see the machlokes. The Rambam, Ramban, and Rashba, which is basically what the Mechaber followed here, the kavanah of that sugya was very simple. She saw dam right after the tashmish. Oh, but we're not going to treat this roisa machmas dam. Why? Because it was samuch levesta. Just the way we just explained it. All right. So the diuk there was that if she does have that vesset, she has a benefit over a woman that does not have a vesset kavua. A vesset kavua means this is very possibly the vesset, so why call it dam machmas tashmish? Okay, that was the way they understood it. Rashi says no. Rashi says goes on a completely different tangent, different way of understanding. He says that what the Gemara is talking about over here is that she does not always see machmas tashmish except for certain times of the month. It all depends on the day of the month. If it's on the 15th day of the month, she might see dam machmas tashmish. Or every 23 days she'll see dam machmas tashmish. But it's not that she sees dam machmas the tashmish itself. You follow me? So Rashi is saying, the Gemara is adding that if there is a veset of sorts, that's what the Gemara, that if there is some sort of veset for the dam machmas tashmish, she will be a surah only during those days of veset machmas tashmish, as opposed to always machmas tashmish. Totally different thing. Beis Yosef says, guess what? The halacha is like both pshatim. Just he doesn't bring this down here. He brings this concept, I think, later on. Here he just talks about the poshup pshat in the Gemara according to the Rashba and the Raman, that if she has a regular vesage and she just had tashmish close to the vesage, you can attribute it to that, not to the damam tashmish. Fine. But Rashi seems to be saying that the Gemara is only talking about this other scenario, that this is an unusual type of machmas tashmish that only happens every so often. Then you have to be choishish on those days only. All right, but that was Rashi. Exactly. That's exactly what the Beis Yosef says. They're not mutually exclusive. And he even goes further. He says both are the halacha. They are both actually the halacha, both dinim. Yeah. I figured I'll mention the Shitas HaMordechai here, even though it's not halacha l'maaseh, it doesn't really matter here. Mordechai says that the cloud, that whole sugya, is talking more. There's a greater emphasis on makkah. I don't know if it's an injury necessarily, but some sort of bruise, wound in the body, and the sugya has to do with that. And therefore, this is the way you interpret it. And even under Mordechai, there's two ways to interpret that. If she has a veset, then this is not the dam hanida, but this is dam hamaka. The Mordechai says. If she has a veset, then you say, this is not necessarily the dam hanida, this could be dam hamaka. Okay. So there's a machlokes on those words. Did the Mordechai mean to say that you're therefore going to always be lenient on dam in a situation where there was tashmish? That as long as it was not during her veset, because she has a veset, then this is because of something else? Or is it only when she has a makkah? Is that what he meant? Only when specifically she has a makkah. Like the Taz. The Taz said, no, what he meant was only if she really has a makkah, then you point to the makkah. But if there's no makkah, no. Otherwise, there is a din of dam machmas tashmish. But there are others who learn, no, that the Mordechai was actually being makel all the way. That if she has a veset, this is not her veset, you don't have to worry about it. In other words, you don't blame the makkah necessarily. Maybe she doesn't have a makkah, she's not, whatever. She has something else. But the Taz, and there's others I think too that go learn like the Taz, that it's only, the Mordechai only meant to say what he said is if there's a makkah. So when she has a veset, what the Gemara is talking about is that you attribute it to the makkah. So there has to be a makkah in order to blame something else. However, if there's no veset kavua, obviously you're not toilet in the makkah. You have to have a veset kavua. This is a big advantage. A woman has a veset kavua, then it saves a lot of problems. Okay, fine. So this is basically the various shittas. There's other shittas, other interpretations of the Gemara, but the basic ones is what I told you. All right, now let's go to the next question. Now that we understand that there is a possibility that at least according to one interpretation, that there was tashmish samuch levesta, and she's saved because of whatever reason. The way we understood Pashup Shah, she's saved because we blamed the Veset. How did she go ahead, be with her husband when she's not supposed to? So there's various interesting terutzim over here. As I think the Prisha says, we're not talking about Rishonim over here. You know? So what happened over here? We're talking about people who are careful. The Prisha, the Prisha on the tour, you have the Prisha, the Drisha, you have commentaries on the tour. So the Prisha there says like this: it is possible, very possible, when a Veset is during the day, Shuhu Makdim Me'at, that he sometimes arrives early, a few hours. So it was not an Issa, per se. They were allowed to be there. Because it can happen that he comes a little bit early. And therefore, it did not come machmas tashmish. It came early.
So if you hold to me, it work.
Exactly. With the Orzaru, this doesn't work. Right. The Orzaru is the Orzaru. Yeah, right, very true. The Shach says, how could you say that? That your toilet, that the Vesa came early? You can't say the Vesa came early. If the Chachomim allowed them to be together at night, because it's not the same Oino or the Veset, then they wouldn't. How could you say that the Vesa can come early? That they wouldn't have allowed. You can't say they can be, but the Vesa can come early. Well, if the Vesa can come early, how could you allow it? You would have to go like the Orzarua. You would have to be choishish, right? So the Shach says, no, that can't be the reason that the Vesa could come early. So the Shach says, well, one possibility is, nonetheless, they were together. In other words, they went against the halacha. Yeah, they're not supposed to be. Yeah, that's it. But there's a good number of poskim that say, no, chas v'shalom. There's all kinds of possibilities. The guy is going out of town. Remember the halacha of a husband going out of town? According to many poskim, mitzvah, it's a mitzvah to be with his wife. And some say, even during the time of the Veset, close to the Veset. Not everybody agrees to it, right? Some say it's better to stay away, remember? Hug, and all those kinds of things. But there are such possibilities where it would be mutter for him to be with his wife close to the Veset. So you don't have to say that they did an Isra here. Anyway, Rabbi Yehuda brings down that if it's a Veset She'eno Kavua, then obviously we don't apply this heter here. We don't say that, oh, it could have been the Veset. A Veset She'eno Kavua, you don't say that. It's only when there's a Veset Kavua that you can say, well, it's Samuch LeVeset, then it makes sense. If it's a Veset She'eno Kavua, you're going to say, well, it could be the Veset, but it's not Kavua, then we don't say it. And according to some, even if it's, there's the crazy place I believe I saw, says even if it's an Oina Beinonis, Oina Beinonis we are Choishish, 30 days. 29 and a half days, and she said, Machmas Tashmish. We don't know if it's Machmas Tashmish, but it's Oina Beinonis a few hours from now. So he has a suffix. The Aruch HaShulchan is Mekel, I think, by Oina Beinonis, but the others are Machmer. Can we blame the Oina Beinonis for it? It's a good question. Because Oina Beinonis is pretty average, pretty standard. If there's no Vesa Kavua, we're going to definitely consider it seriously as a possibility that she's going to be seeing around that time. And remember, we had a whole machlokes to get Bichlal. If it's the first time, do we count the first time, or we don't count the first, and now we count 3 more? It all depends if you need a b'dika all the time. It's like, according to the Rambam, you always shoot a b'dika all the time. She didn't check herself. Well, that's her fault. Because maybe she was tmeya from before. According to the Rabbin, she doesn't ever have to check herself, so the first time doesn't count. It doesn't count that she has 3 more times. But anyway, if you have a reason to be toilet, as we will see with Makkah, or Veset Kavua, or Oina Beinonis, that would be a very good question. If somebody were to tell you, listen, it was the Oina Beinonis, and what were you doing, this time with the wife? Well, I believe he got out of town. Okay, in other words, there is a possibility that he was allowed to. Oina Beinonis, that's almost like a Veset Kavua. Possibly, yeah. So the Aruch HaShulchan is Mekel, I believe here. But at least we understand that in the case of the Mechaber, Shimsha Samuch Levesta, and we know that a Veset Kavua is very, very helpful. That would be one of the scenarios that either he was headed out of town, or like the Shad says, that they made a mistake, they forgot or whatever.
You would have to have a very, very before. Literally, she has to know that it comes in the day.
Yeah, it's during the day, every 28 days, right?
She has to know it.
Yeah. She hasn't been getting it at night. It's been during the day. It's been every 28 days.
That has to be fairly unusual.
Yeah. Today, I think most women do not have that regularity. But there's what we call chatzi kavua, which also is a little help. Never under 28, but 28 to 30. Yeah, that is more common. And that helps too, a little bit. Sure. All right. Let's go on to Sif Hey. That was Sif Dalad in discussing the scenario of Samuch Levesto. Now comes Makkah. We just finished with Parshas Boy, and now into Bashar. There was Makkahs there, right? We should never know of Makkahs. There's all kinds, unfortunately, of Makkahs that people have, internal Makkahs, that they suffer from, and some of them they bleed from, men and women, that we should never know. Physical Makkahs, yeah. Hey, there's psychological, emotional Makkahs too. That's a different kind of Makkahs. Makot. Now, some things are self-inflicted, I should say, since we're talking about illnesses a little. People do things to themselves, as the Rambam points out, if I believe correctly, he says the majority of illnesses are because of what you eat. If you would eat right, you pretty much would never be sick. Sounds like the Rambam. Now, today I would have to be a little bit worried about the statement, because we're exposed to smog. We're exposed to all kinds of things. And you get sick even if you watch yourself. There's allergies. There's so many allergies today. Peanut allergies. Did you hear about peanut allergies in the 1960s?
No, but I heard of people who expected things.
Okay. I've never heard of so many allergies when I was growing up. Allergies for everything. Allergy for milk, allergy for bread, allergy for this, allergy for that. Allergies. What?
Our knowledge has. They weren't known.
No. I agree that this is true too. Knowledge has increased, but I think the teva ishtana, people are weaker today than they were before. They were able to resist certain things better. In some ways, we have been able to immunize ourselves against smallpox and all those things that had attacked the previous generations. So in some ways, we're better off. In some ways, we're worse off.
Oh, because it's not the bacteria.
Exactly. Yes. That's teva ishtaneh in both ways. Yes, very true. So it could very possibly be that women, from time to time, from place to place, because the geography, we know from the Gemara, the location does affect on many ways biologically what it does to people, not only to the coloration, to the physique, and to how intelligent they are. Believe it or not. Yes.
What affects that?
Huh?
What
the location.
The location.
יש ארץ שמגדלת חכמים, וארץ שמגדלת טיפשים. Yeah, I don't remember the exact spot right now. Yes, there is a land, there's locations where people the air is better, and it is conducive, which would be a good word for this, to learn better, where there's other places that is not as conducive for learning, and therefore people not as bright.
Maybe more from.
So anyway, less sunlight, that there's places where there's less sunlight during the year. And you know what this does to people there? They're depressed. Yeah, there's more suicides there. Anyway, so scientists don't know everything.
Which is it?
Oh, sure. Psychological, emotional, sure.
No, the major test.
Yes.
Beyond.
Uh-huh.
Is the
Okay. Yeah.
correlation base.
Right.
People may be.
Right.
Which is very, very high depression right now.
Is that? Oh, yeah.
The test is skewed. The sample base was done there.
Right.
And like all other psychological graphical biases.
Yes.
There's a separate one that's done for certain other things.
Right.
They try to go along with what you're saying.
Oh, sure. It does,
The
yeah.
depression rate in that.
Imagine somebody living in a place where the winter is like now, 40 below zero. They have it,
Well, they're friends.
Yeah? What does that mean?
Bad weather, you can get.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. The riffraff.
They don't come.
Yeah, they don't come.
No, there's very little alternative.
Right. That's exactly it. That's the point here. Yeah. So anyway, all kinds of situations can produce makas of all types, internal makas. Let's take a quick example. How can a young girl, lose her besulim without being married? She gets married, and her husband finds out that she's not a besula, and says, I married you on condition that you were besula. Some people are makbid on that. It can make a difference in the ksuva too. That's the whole sugi about this in the Gemara. And she says, listen, I'm a mukat etz. Mukat etz means that I was injured. And what's an example of a mukat? Horseback riding. I love horses. I used to do a lot of horseback riding. Is she believable? Yes, very possibly, because we do know for a fact that is able to cause the breakage of the besulim. So it wasn't that she was chas v'shalom involved with another man. It just happened naturally. There are various ways where the besulim can break apart in natural ways, through gymnastics and all kinds of other ways too. So in the same way that can happen to her besulim, some makkah could have developed in her youth that was there from before, or even after she got married, that was there a while or developed. Doesn't make a difference. Right now we don't know what kind of a makkah it is. All we know is that this makkah may produce dam. And that's what we're concerned about. We're concerned about because if it is that, she's actually better off. In some ways, she's better off, if we know for sure it's that. Because then we will attribute it to the makkah and not to the dama makor, dama niddah. So Sif Hay says, Im yesh makkah ba'oisom mokom, in that particular area. Toilim bedam makosa. The Mechaber just says, we attribute it to the dam of the makkah. So again, we're going from dam machmas tashmish, which made the situation very, very serious for this woman and her, to alternatives or options that could save the day of another husband, of dikas shferes, complete recovery. All right. Then we say, well, let's not rush to conclusions that maybe it's also samoch lebesta, that could be possibility. Okay, we've discussed that, that's possible too. And now we're saying there's another possibility too. Don't just go to the rabbanut right away and get a divorce. Maybe there's a makkah there. Let's find out. And it's very possible, by the way. She does see dam machmas tashmish. Because dam machmas tashmish in itself is rare, it's not so common. So that you should look into the possibility of makkah. I'm assuming that this is not samoch levesta. So if the Mechaber just says poshut, im yesh makkah ba'oiso makom, then toilim bedam makoso. You can just say that it's very possible it's the dam makkah. I'll read the scene.
Not the makkah.
Right, and not as a result of the tashush itself. Right. I'm just going to read the Mechaber, and then we'll see what's going on. Ve'im dam makoso mishun medam reiyoso einon toilim bedam makoso. However, in the event that we know for a fact from experience from before that the nature, the coloration of the blood of her makkah is different than dam hanida, then obviously you can't be toiling dam makkah. Let's say her dam makkah has a pussy look to it. Pus. It looks different. Then obviously, if you know for sure, but usually probably you will not notice a difference. Dam is dam. But he just tells us, in the event there is a clear difference between the dam of this and the dam of that, then you're not going to say, oh, it's dam makkah for sure. No, check it out. Okay, so before we go into the Ramah, who's much more detailed about the various scenarios of possibility, and of course goes into the sugya a lot more, what are we talking about? What are the issues here when we're talking about makkahs? All right, so number one, there's several things to consider. Number one, we need to consider between a scenario where there is a makkah, but will it make a difference if this makkah, in other words, that we have knowledge that this makkah produces dam or not? Does that have to be known? Or is it sufficient that we know there is a makkah? Okay, so that's one scenario or one inyan, one issue that has to be discussed over here. The Mechaber doesn't seem to be saying here. And this is, it's brought down. In other words, these distinctions are made in Halacha. These distinctions are discussed amongst the Rishonim. Mechaber doesn't seem to say. Wait a minute, is the makkah producing blood or not? Do you have to know it's producing blood? What kind of a makkah is it? Or, no, it's a makkah, but I don't know for sure if there's dam coming from the makkah. The Mechaber didn't tell us. So the Mechaber, for some reason, is a little vague here. But, Mechaber is not vague. How could mechaber be vague? Now again, everybody would like to say mechaber is vague. No. I would rather say the reason why the mechaber doesn't get too much details is because he follows the Rashba, he follows the Ramban, he follows the Rambam. Just look up the Rambam. Now you can of course, you can complain. Well, why didn't the mechaber who's putting together Shuchan Aruch be more specific?
Well, wouldn't mention it would be just divided.
Sometimes he does, and then it's easy.
Just
Right, in a bridge form. But but when you're right. When he does, and then nobody would complain. Here they say, the mechaber was vague, but they don't complain that harshly, only because it is apparent that the mechaber is going along with the various Rishonim who hold a certain way. So he didn't maybe feel that it was so necessary. At the time, maybe he didn't realize that there's going to be a whole bunch of achronim after him, or others who are going to say differently, and then he's going to say, well, wait a minute, I didn't mean to be like them, I meant to say like him. Yeah.
Can come, but not always.
Right.
So is this one, is it that the particular illness the person has could cause, so that she has a history?
I guess so. I mean, you could further elaborate. Since when is a problem there? Apparently, there was a problem. She's aware of it somehow, that there's a makkah. But usually, if you read the whole discussion in the Rishonim and Achronim, it appears to be that the common denominator is that there is pain. That's the way I understood it. The common denominator between everyone is, and that is how she knows there's a makkah. There is also the possibility that she checked herself there and she felt something. She poked herself there once and pus came out. And of course there's always the possibility that she sees blood coming out from there and it's not her period. And she suspects it. And why does she suspect it? Because she feels the pain. I think the pain is really what's making it much more obvious to everyone that there's a makkah there. Yeah, right.
That don't always.
That's true. Yeah.
And if we can say that there's a theory, it
Right.
will allow us to be very maker.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. It all depends. For example, scenario number one, or issue number one that is discussed is: are we talking about a makkah that we know for sure has blood, or we're talking about a makkah that we're not sure if this makkah produces blood, or we're talking about a situation where we don't know if there's bichlal a makkah, but she's in pain. There may be a makkah because. So we're being even more. We're questioning the situation even more as a result of seeing the blood. I mean, what we have right now in front of us is blood. Okay? So we're saying, well, wait a minute, she's in pain. Does that mean she has a makkah? Well, we know there is a makkah, but does that makkah produce blood? Or is it also okay to attribute it to the makkah even though we don't know for sure it produces? Then, of course, we would have to figure all of this with, would it make a difference if the woman has a veset kavua or does not have a veset kavua? And, because she saw during the time she did not have a veset. Another issue that is discussed is, okay, let's assume that we will determine that there's a good chance that this is makkah, and therefore she doesn't have to get divorced from her husband. But does that mean she still has to sit 7 nikiyim and go to the mikvah? Were we only makel for her not to get divorced because we were lenient in that respect, that she doesn't get divorced? Or are we also being lenient that we don't force her to go to the tefillah again, the mikvah? It's a big question. And it seems to be, from what that the consensus is, yes, we're going to be makel for her staying with her husband, if there's a chance to admit it to a makkah, but we're going to be machmer to make her go to the mikvah. In most cases. There are cases that we could be makel if we're sure that this is a makkah, it's not coming from the makor, from the side, it's a bruise, it's for sure not from the makor. Yes, obviously that's something else. But if there is too much of a suffix where the dam is coming from, it looks like it could be dam Niddah, we're going to send her to the mikveh. We're going to make her, wait, go through the whole process. But we are, under certain circumstances, we are going to be makel and say that this is not dam machmas tashmish. Oh yeah, so for that, we can make that distinction. So that's another issue that's discussed. Another case that we will discuss later on is whether did she have to feel something coming down? And what if it's just a stain? Will that make a difference if there's a mark or not? Because as you know, with stains, eventually when we learn about stains are derabanan. Nonetheless, even though they're derabanan, if it qualifies as a real stain that's metame, she goes through the whole 5 and 7. She goes to the mikveh too. So even though with stains we are very lenient to try to figure out if this is a stain that's metame or not, depending on the size, depending on the coloration, depending on the location where they found the stain. So even though we're lenient, and quite lenient with stains, nonetheless, we have to be me'ayin if it makes a difference or not, if it's a lot of blood, little blood, or just a stain. Because we did say before that if it's a lot of blood coming out, especially machmas tashmish, it's really a problem. Because a lot of blood coming out is usually not an injury. It's usually not a bruise. In other words, that may be a reusa in itself. That may be bad enough that it could give away the whole thing as, something is being triggered as a result of the tashmish. And obviously she would have to check herself every time she sees that. And if it happens 3 times, it's a problem. Anytime, therefore, a woman does see dam, machmas tashmish, is critical enough for her to immediately take action. Check herself before, check herself after. She does not want to get into a situation where she thinks it's dam machmas tashmish and may not be. Maybe she was tameh from before. It could be with something else. So if it's too close for comfort, there's still a chance it could be something else. So in this situation, a woman should check with her doctor and not just rely on her own exams and her own checks. Maybe we'll just go quickly through the Ramah and then we'll review this whole sugya next week. But the Ramah and the Mechaber says he's a little bit more elaborate, a little bit more explicit. We're talking about a woman that has a veset kavua. Therefore, we can therefore make the assumption if it's not during the time of the veset, that this is her makkah that she has. Even though we don't know if that dam did produce blood. Oh, so the Ramah somehow is taking sides here with certain poiskim, certain shitas, that hold that you don't have to know for certain that this makkah produced dam. As long as you know there's a makkah there, because she has a veset kavua. And this is shelo b'shas vesta. All right. V'chein also, im ein la veset kavua. What if she has no veset kavua? But what she does have is the following advantage. She doesn't have a veset kavua, v'usofek im adam ba min hamakor min hatzdadim. But she has a suffix to begin with where this blood is coming from. You know what? There's this real chance, 50-50 chance, that this blood is not from the makor, it's coming from the sides. Then you have talina b'maka mikach sfek sveka. Then you are able to assume it's coming from the makkah because you have a sfek sveka. Safek min hatzdadim or min hamakor. It's a suffix whether it was from the side or from the actual from the womb. V'im tirtze loima min hamakor. If you want to say it really came from the makor, shemahu min hamakah, maybe from the makkah. And it's really not dam niddah. So you have 2 sfekas. Aval im yadua sheba min hamakor. Once you know for sure it's coming from the makor, afal pi sheyesh lo makkah b'makor. Even though she has a makkah b'makor, you can't say eno toilu b'makkah. You can't say, well, there's a makkah there. No. Im en la veset kavua, you can't. You can't do that. She has no veset kavua. It could be coming from her veset. You can't say it's coming from the makkah. Ela im kain, unless you know, for sure. Makoso moitzi adam. In that case, there's no veset kavua. You know the makkah is in the makor, but you know the makkah produces blood. Fine, granted. Then that could be possible.
She doesn't have a veset, or it's not the time of it.
No, she doesn't have a veset at all. Right, so it could be coming because of the veset, regular dam and niddah. But even though she has a makkah in the makor, so what? It's only one suffix. But if that makkah for sure produces blood, then that's different.
How is it different? No, it's still only.
Huh?
Is it how?
Because you can be soymech. That's the whole idea of can we be soymech on a mat. Remember, it's a dam machmas tashmish we're talking about. It's only because of dam machmas tashmish. Otherwise, the veset sheina kavua is the veset sheina kavua.
So we only if it was not a makkah. If it's a makkah the motzi dam in the womb, it needs the double stop.
Right. No. Yeah, because here we're trying to save the marriage more than anything else. We're still dealing with damach mastashmisher, supposedly.
But the way the argument went was, if the
there's no vesed kavua.
If the makkah does not produce.
Right, we don't know if it does.
Well, we don't know if it
we
does.
don't know
But
if
we
it
know
does.
for sure that it does, we don't need double stuff.
But before we didn't need to know.
Well,
If she has a vesed kavua, we don't need to know that there's a makkah that produces. So that's already a chiluk that the Rama makes. He goes along with the shittas to say, I don't need to know if the makkah produces blood because she has a vesed kavua, it's fine, she has a makkah. Here he says, no, I'm going to require that the makkah produces blood since she has no vesed kavua.
But I thought you were saying that if it came from the womb, and if it came in...
Right, that's because you don't know where it's coming from. So you naturally have a double suffix. There's no vesed kavua.
When there is no vesed.
Right.
It
still applies, yeah, because you have a real fake sveka.
I don't double suffix if I know for sure it generates blood.
Right.
So when I don't have a kavua,
I
need one of the two.
I need one of the two. I need something more.
Either double suffix.
Right. So he wants to say, doesn't mean everybody agrees with, but at least the Ramah is saying that if the makkah isn't the makor, but we know for sure this makkah produces blood, then that could be okay. Even though it's a best shena kavua, it could be okay because we know this makkah produces blood. Chein mashma b'mordechi. Mikol mokom b'shas vesto. Now, on the other hand, he says during the time of her vesed, o milamed yom lilamed yom every 30 days. Eino toile b'makoso. Of course, during that time frame, she cannot be toile the makkah because she's expecting her vesed. If she's always going to say it's the makkah, when is she going to be tameh?
How do you even establish a vesed?
Exactly. Yeah. Now, but on that, the Shach says, on that, I think the Shach says that even during the time of her vesed, if she actually feels her makkah bleeding, she can be toilet on it. So it's, in other words, the Shach points out that that's only if you don't know for sure. But if you know for sure the makkah is bleeding, she feels it, she just can tell, somehow she can tell that it's the makkah bleeding, then that's of course different, even though that's the time of the vesed. So anyway, the Ramah ends up by just telling us that uksomin toila bechol inyan, with stains she can always be toila, with anything. Stains is a lot easier. We can say it's a makkah, we can say it's a cockroach. We can say many things about stains. Where did they come from? How did they come about? And that's going to be, of course, interesting to see, because if it's close, even if it's close to her vesed, nonetheless, it's only a ketem. She's not seeing too much blood. It all depends where she saw it. Again, it could be that it's the onset of her period, a little stain. It could be. So you have to be careful with this. How close is it to her vesed? Is it a vesed kavua or not? But generally speaking, with Ksamim, you can't be more lenient, and Mitzvah Hashem will get into it a little bit more now. Okay.